Nelly's phone vibrated just as she finished locking her office for the night. She glanced at the screen, expecting another reminder from work. Instead, she saw Ethan's name. A smile almost crossed her face until she opened the message. "I'm leaving you. I'm moving to Miami with my 20-year-old babe. I've already emptied our joint account. Haha." For one long second, the parking garage around her disappeared. Then another notification appeared. Withdrawal complete. She opened the banking app. The balance of the account they had spent 12 years building together now sat just above zero. No apology, no conversation, no explanation, just one mocking text and an empty account. Across the country, Ethan leaned back in an airport lounge, laughing as he showed his phone to the young woman beside him. "I told you she'd completely fall apart," he said. "She's too predictable." His phone buzzed. He grinned before opening Nelly's reply. Only 2 words. "Good luck." His smile faded for the briefest moment. "That's it?" his girlfriend asked. He shrugged. "She's probably still in shock." He tossed the phone onto the table, picked up his boarding pass, and walked toward his gate, convinced he had just won the easiest divorce imaginable. He never noticed that his wife wasn't crying, she wasn't calling, and she wasn't begging him to come home. Nelly quietly slipped her phone into her purse, walked to her car, and drove home in complete silence. The house felt strangely peaceful when she unlocked the front door. For the first time in months, there was no tension waiting inside, no sarcastic comments, no excuses about another business trip, no carefully rehearsed lies. She placed her purse on the kitchen counter, removed her heels, and walked upstairs with the same steady pace she used before every important decision in her career. Inside the home office sat a locked metal file cabinet. She entered a code. The drawer slid open. 4 thick folders rested neatly inside. Financial statements. Legal consultation. Property records. Tax documents. She laid each folder across the desk without the slightest trace of panic. Then she reached for another phone, one Ethan had never seen. She pressed a single contact. The call was answered immediately. "Good evening, Nelly. I'm ready." There was no surprise in her attorney's voice. "I've been expecting this call." Nelly looked once more at Ethan's text. She didn't delete it. She saved screenshots, forwarded copies, and placed them into the growing digital file. Every word mattered. Every timestamp mattered. Every decision Ethan had made tonight mattered. Her attorney spoke again. Did he actually admit in writing that he transferred the money? Word for word. A short pause followed. Then came the sentence that made Nelly slowly close the file cabinet. "Once he lands in Miami," the attorney said quietly, "there's no stopping what's about to happen." Nelly looked out the window into the dark night, her expression impossible to read. Somewhere above the clouds, Ethan believed he had stolen everything that mattered. He had no idea he'd just taken the one thing that would be used against him. 3 months earlier, Ethan had started coming home later than usual. At first, Nelly barely questioned it. As a senior corporate finance director, she understood deadlines, late meetings, and unexpected travel. She believed marriage required trust, not constant suspicion. One evening, Ethan tossed his keys onto the kitchen island and headed straight for the shower. "Long day?" she asked. "You wouldn't understand," he answered without looking at her. It wasn't the words that bothered her. It was how quickly he'd stopped explaining anything. The changes came slowly enough that each one seemed harmless on its own. His phone was suddenly face down every time it left his hand. Passwords changed without explanation. He started taking calls outside. Weekend client meetings appeared on his calendar with increasing frequency. Whenever Nelly walked into the room, conversations ended. One Saturday morning, she reached for the tablet they both used. It asked for a new password. "Ethan?" He looked over from the living room. "I changed it." "Oh, why?" He shrugged. "Security." We've used the same password for years. People change. His answer landed heavier than he realized. A few weeks later, Nelly was reviewing household expenses while paying monthly bills. One transaction caught her attention: $4,800. The description was unfamiliar. She scrolled farther. Another transfer. Then another. Each one larger than the last. When Ethan came home, she placed the statement beside his dinner plate. "Can you explain these?" He barely glanced at it. Investment opportunities. What kind of investments? The kind that make money. She frowned. "I usually know about our investments." He laughed. "You don't need to know every financial decision I make." She held his gaze. "It's our money." His expression hardened. "You worry too much." He pushed the statement aside and continued eating, as if the conversation were finished. The dismissiveness hurt more than the missing money. For years they had discussed every major financial decision together. Now Ethan behaved as though asking basic questions made her unreasonable. She wanted to believe work pressure had changed him. She wanted to believe this was temporary. Instead of arguing, she convinced herself to wait. Maybe things would settle down. Maybe he would eventually tell her the truth. The answer arrived unexpectedly. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Ethan called to say he'd forgotten an important contract at home. "Can you grab the blue folder from my desk?" he asked. "Of course." His home office was unusually neat. She opened the top drawer. No blue folder. She checked the second drawer. Nothing. Then she noticed several unopened envelopes shoved beneath a stack of magazines. The return address belonged to the Internal Revenue Service. She froze. Ethan had always insisted he handled their taxes perfectly. Curiosity overcame hesitation. She looked only at the outside. Each notice was marked "Second Notice" or "Final Reminder." She didn't open them. She simply placed them exactly where she had found them. When Ethan arrived home, he snatched the blue folder from the bookshelf behind the desk. "It was here the whole time," he muttered. "You never checked there." He walked away before she could answer, but Nelly noticed something else. He immediately checked the desk drawers, as if he wanted to make sure nothing had been disturbed. That evening, Nelly didn't confront him. She didn't accuse him. Instead, she quietly opened her laptop after Ethan went to bed. The next morning, during her lunch break, she scheduled 3 confidential appointments: a respected family law attorney, a forensic accountant recommended by a colleague, and the financial advisor who had managed her personal retirement investments for years. At the attorney's office, she slid copies of recent bank statements across the desk. "I don't want a divorce," she said honestly. "I want to know whether I'm imagining things." The attorney studied the documents before looking up. "Right now, you don't have conclusions. You have questions. So what do I do?" "Don't accuse him." Nelly blinked. "Really? If there is misconduct, confrontation gives someone time to destroy evidence." The forensic accountant echoed the same advice. "Download every statement you can legally access. Preserve emails. Document dates. Keep everything. Don't alter accounts. Don't move marital assets without legal advice. Just create a complete record." Finally, her financial advisor helped separate assets that were already legally hers alone from those held jointly, ensuring everything was done transparently and in accordance with the law. Every meeting ended with the same instruction: stay calm, stay quiet, stay prepared. Over the next several weeks, Nelly followed every recommendation with the discipline that had made her successful professionally. She archived statements, recorded transaction histories, saved emails, documented unexplained transfers. Meanwhile, Ethan became increasingly confident. He mistook her silence for surrender. He stopped hiding his arrogance. One evening, over dinner, he leaned back in his chair with an almost amused smile. "You know what I like about you?" Nelly looked up. "What?" "You never ask the questions that actually matter." He lifted his glass. "And you'll never see this coming." The first photo appeared less than 2 hours after Ethan's plane landed in Miami. A rooftop restaurant, ocean in the background, a cocktail raised toward the camera, his arm wrapped around a young woman smiling into the sunset. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to leave the past behind to start living." Within minutes, the comments began. "Good for you." "About time." "You deserve happiness." Nelly stared at the screen for a few seconds before quietly locking her phone. She didn't reply. She didn't defend herself. She didn't even remove her wedding photos from her own profile. Instead, she picked up her briefcase and walked into work exactly on time. Ethan, meanwhile, had already started rewriting history. He called mutual friends one by one. "You know how controlling Nelly was. I couldn't breathe anymore. She monitored everything. I finally escaped." Most people had never seen the private side of their marriage. They only knew Ethan as outgoing and charismatic. His version sounded convincing. Several friends sent him supportive messages. A few quietly stopped contacting Nelly altogether. One even texted her, "I hope you eventually find peace." Nelly read the message, smiled sadly, and set the phone aside. She understood something Ethan didn't. People can believe a lie for a while. Documents don't. 2 days later, Nelly sat across from her attorney in a quiet conference room. The divorce petition was spread neatly across the table. "You've reviewed everything?" the attorney asked. "I have." "Any changes?" Nelly shook her head. "No." The attorney slid a pen toward her. Once she signed, the paperwork would be filed immediately. Nelly hesitated only long enough to take one slow breath. Then she signed. There would be no emotional phone calls, no public arguments, no desperate attempts to save a marriage Ethan had already abandoned. The legal process had begun. Ethan received notice while sitting beside the hotel pool. He laughed when he opened the envelope. "So she finally figured it out," he said to his girlfriend. "What now?" she asked. "Now we divide what's left." He leaned back confidently. "Which isn't much." The first preliminary financial disclosure meeting took place several weeks later, over a secure video conference. The mediator greeted both parties professionally. "Good morning. Today we're reviewing the initial financial disclosures provided by both sides." Ethan appeared relaxed. Nelly looked composed. Their attorneys sat beside them. The mediator began. "Mr. Carter, you've disclosed that the joint checking account represented the majority of the couple's accessible liquid funds." "Correct." "And you transferred those funds before separation?" "I did." "Why?" Ethan smiled. "They belonged to both of us. I simply moved them first." His attorney shifted slightly in his chair. The mediator made a note. "So you're confirming you personally initiated those transfers?" "Yes." "No one else had access?" "No." The answer hung in the silence. His own words had just established a critical fact on the record. Then it was Nelly's attorney's turn. She stood and placed several organized binders onto the conference table. "These are our financial disclosures." The mediator opened the first binder. Every page was tabbed. Every statement was dated. Every transfer had supporting documentation, bank records, property records, tax filings, timeline summaries, cross-referenced financial statements. The mediator slowly flipped through the documents. His expression changed. He looked back toward Ethan. "Mr. Carter." Another page turned. Then another. "I'm seeing transactions here that don't appear anywhere in your disclosures." Ethan frowned. "That's impossible." The mediator held up a bank statement. "This transfer predates the separation by several months." Another page. "And this account wasn't listed." Another. "Neither was this investment activity." For the first time since sending that text message, Ethan stopped smiling. He looked toward his attorney. She was no longer taking notes. She was staring directly at him. The meeting ended earlier than expected. The mediator requested additional documentation before scheduling the next session. Everyone gathered their files in silence. As Ethan reached the hallway outside the conference room, his attorney closed the door behind them. She lowered her voice. "Ethan." "What?" "Why didn't you tell me about these transactions?" His confidence disappeared. For the first time, he realized he wasn't walking into an easy divorce. He was walking into something he no longer understood. Ethan barely slept that night. The question from his attorney echoed through his mind. Why didn't you tell me about these transactions? He had gone into the financial disclosure meeting expecting to intimidate Nelly. Instead, he had walked out feeling like everyone else knew something he didn't. At 7 the next morning, he was already dialing his bank. "I need copies of every transaction from the past year," he demanded. The representative replied calmly. "We can certainly provide those, Mr. Carter." "How long?" "Several business days." "I don't have several business days." "I'm sorry, sir. That's our standard processing time." He ended the call in frustration. His next call went to the accountant, who had occasionally helped with his side investments. "Hey," Ethan said, "remember those transfers we discussed?" There was a pause. "Which ones?" "The business expenses." The accountant's voice became cautious. "Ethan, I advised you months ago to keep personal and business transactions separate. They're fine. I hope they are." "What does that mean?" "It means I told you in writing not to mix accounts." The call ended without the reassurance Ethan wanted. By the end of the day, he had contacted 2 financial institutions, an investment platform, and a former business associate. Every conversation uncovered another loose end, a transfer he had forgotten, an account he hadn't disclosed, a payment categorized incorrectly. What he had always considered harmless shortcuts suddenly looked very different when viewed together. Meanwhile, the forensic accountant hired by Nelly continued assembling a complete financial timeline. Every statement was matched against tax filings. Every transfer was cross-referenced with account records. Nothing was assumed. Everything had documentation. The accountant met with Nelly and her attorney. "We're not drawing conclusions," he said, pointing to the timeline projected on the conference room screen. "We're identifying patterns." He highlighted several entries. These transfers began months before the separation. Another section appeared. These investment accounts weren't disclosed during the preliminary filing. Then another. And these personal expenses appear to have been routed through accounts Ethan identified as business-related. Nelly listened quietly. She had spent her entire career believing numbers eventually told the truth. Watching those numbers line up one after another was strangely sobering. Her attorney looked at the growing stack of evidence. "The important thing," she said, "is that everything we're presenting is supported by records. No speculation, no assumptions, just documents." Nelly nodded. "That's all I've ever wanted." Back in Miami, Ethan tried convincing himself the situation was temporary. He met his girlfriend for dinner at a waterfront restaurant. She noticed immediately that he wasn't paying attention. "You've checked your phone 6 times. "I'm handling something." "I thought the divorce was basically over." "So did I." She studied him. "Is something wrong?" He forced a smile. "Nothing I can't fix." But even he didn't sound convinced. The following morning, another problem surfaced. One of the mutual friends who had celebrated his new beginning called unexpectedly. "I just wanted to ask you something." "What?" "I ran into someone who mentioned there are lawyers and forensic accountants involved." "So?" "They said there might be financial issues." Ethan laughed a little too loudly. "People exaggerate." "Maybe." The friend hesitated. "I just figured I'd check before my name gets connected to something messy." After hanging up, Ethan stared at the phone. Instead of offering support, people were beginning to distance themselves. The confident messages had slowed. The invitations had stopped. His carefully constructed version of events was beginning to crack. Nelly, meanwhile, refused every invitation to discuss the divorce. At work, a colleague gently asked, "Are you okay?" She smiled politely. "I'm handling it." She didn't criticize Ethan. She didn't share private details. She simply focused on her responsibilities and let the legal process unfold. Outside the courtroom, she maintained the same calm professionalism that had defined her career. Inside the legal process, every fact was speaking for itself. Late Friday afternoon, Ethan's phone rang again. His attorney. He answered immediately. "Please tell me you've got good news." There was silence. Then she spoke in a voice far more serious than before. "Ethan." "What?" "I've reviewed everything the forensic accountant produced." Another pause. "You need to come back immediately." Ethan was on the first flight back the next morning. For the first time since sending that smug text message, he wasn't thinking about Miami, his new relationship, or the life he had imagined. He was thinking about paperwork, about statements, about questions he could no longer answer. His attorney met him outside the conference room before the next legal session. She handed him a thick binder. "I need you to look through this." He flipped through the pages. Bank statements, transfer histories, tax records, property documents, email confirmations. Every section was tabbed. Every page had dates highlighted. Every transaction connected to another. His confidence faded with every page he turned. "Where did she get all of this?" he asked. His attorney looked at him evenly. "From records. You never thought she'd prepare." She closed the binder. "Ethan, preparation isn't the issue anymore." "What is?" "The issue is that your own records match hers." Inside the conference room, the mediator opened the session. "Today we're reviewing the remaining financial documentation submitted by both parties." Nelly sat quietly beside her attorney. She hadn't changed. No dramatic entrance. No smug smile. No celebration. She simply listened. The forensic accountant was asked to summarize his findings. He stood and projected a timeline onto the screen. "As requested, we reviewed available financial records covering the period before separation." He pointed to the earliest entries. Several significant transfers occurred months before either party filed for divorce. Another page appeared. These transfers were followed by additional movements between accounts that were not included in Mr. Carter's initial financial disclosure. Another click. "We also identified personal expenditures that were categorized inconsistently with supporting documentation." The mediator nodded. "Are these conclusions based on assumptions?" "No. They are based on bank records, tax filings, and documented transaction histories. Every statement was accompanied by evidence. No accusations, no speculation, only facts." The mediator turned toward Ethan. "Mr. Carter, do you dispute that you personally initiated the transfer from the joint account on the evening referenced in these records?" Ethan swallowed. "No. And this text message?" The mediator held up an enlarged copy. "I've already emptied our joint account. Haha." "Did you send it?" "Yes." "And immediately afterward, you boarded a flight to Miami?" "Yes." The mediator placed the document back onto the table. "Thank you." The room fell silent. For the first time, Ethan understood what Nelly had realized months earlier. His biggest mistake wasn't taking the money. It was documenting his own intent. During a short recess, Ethan finally approached Nelly. She was standing alone near the courthouse windows, looking out over the city. "Nelly," she turned politely, "I never thought you'd go this far." She looked at him for a moment. "I didn't." "You hired attorneys." "I asked professionals what the law required." "You hired a forensic accountant." "After I found financial activity I couldn't explain." "I thought you trusted me." "I did." Her answer wasn't angry. It was quiet. "And when things stopped making sense, I trusted documentation instead." Ethan looked down. "I was going to pay some of it back." She didn't respond. Because it no longer mattered. The records spoke more clearly than promises ever could. Over the following weeks, the legal process moved steadily toward resolution. The court evaluated the complete financial history instead of focusing only on the final withdrawal. The documented transfers, incomplete disclosures, and unauthorized movement of marital funds significantly weakened Ethan's position. He was ordered to account for the missing marital assets through the legal process. The court's rulings left him responsible for substantial financial obligations and legal costs tied to the documented misconduct. The life he had imagined in Miami began collapsing piece by piece. The expensive apartment became impossible to justify. The luxury spending stopped. His girlfriend, who had believed Ethan's story about escaping a controlling wife and starting over with plenty of money, slowly realized something very different. One evening, she placed her apartment key on the kitchen counter. "You told me the divorce was basically finished. I thought it was. You told me you were financially secure. I was." She shook her head. "No. You thought you were." Then she picked up her suitcase and walked out. The apartment door closed behind her. This time there was no dramatic goodbye, only silence. The friends who had rushed to congratulate Ethan began seeing the court filings and learning more about what had actually happened. One by one, several reached out to Nelly. "I owe you an apology. I shouldn't have believed everything I heard. I judged you without asking." Nelly thanked them for their honesty. She didn't ask anyone to take sides. She didn't seek revenge. She simply accepted that truth often arrives later than gossip. Professionally, nothing about Nelly's life changed except her peace of mind. She continued leading major financial projects. Her reputation remained exactly where she had built it, on preparation, integrity, and discipline. Months later, she signed the closing documents on a beautiful new home, purchased solely in her own name. As she walked through the empty living room, sunlight poured through the windows. There were no arguments, no hidden statements, no locked phones, only possibility. Her attorney called later that afternoon. "Everything is finalized." Nelly smiled. "Thank you. You did the hard part." "No," she replied gently. "I just stayed calm long enough for the truth to catch up." The last time she saw Ethan was outside the courthouse after the final documents had been signed. He looked older, tired. The confidence that had once filled every room had disappeared. "Nelly." She stopped. "I made a terrible mistake." She nodded once. "Yes, I wish I could change everything." She looked at him without anger. "You thought emptying our joint account ended my future." He lowered his eyes. She continued. "You never realized you emptied every advantage you had." Then she turned, walked down the courthouse steps, and never looked back. The text message Ethan believed would humiliate her forever had become the strongest piece of evidence against him. He tried to build a new life on deception. Nelly rebuilt hers on patience, preparation, and the truth. And for the first time in years, her future belonged to no one but herself.